Glicked? Oh, hell no, we are not doing this again. It was cute one time, Twitter. Don't push it. Well, there are two big movies out this weekend, so I had to choose which one to review. And I gotta tell you, I had no interest in seeing the Wicked movie even before the actress attacked the fans on social media for having the audacity to want the poster to look like the Broadway version, and I damn sure didn't feel like giving it my money after she pulled that stunt, so even though it might not be the smart move on my part in terms of what's gonna feed the algorithm, it's time for Gladiator 2, a sequel to a movie that's almost as old as this one's target demographic. Because Beetlejuice just pulled that off and made a lot of money, how hard could it be, right? Well, harder than they thought, as it turns out. I think it's pretty telling how little buzz there was for this film. Maybe it's because the audience is just sequeled out right now, or maybe too many of us aren't falling for the nostalgia bait anymore. Either way, did Gladiator really need a sequel? Was anyone really asking for this? Sure, the original was a great film. Won Best Picture at the Oscars, pretty much made Russell Crowe's whole career. And yet when this thing dropped, I didn't hear any chatter for it beyond a general feeling of, oh hey, Gladiator's back. And that was more or less my reaction when I walked out of this thing. I didn't love it, didn't hate it. It was nice to look at, the sets were pretty, action sequences were fun, I liked some of the performances. It was a movie. And unfortunately, one that didn't need to be made. The aesthetic details are all really nice, the cinematography is terrific, battle scenes are epic, all that stuff is as good as you'd expect with Ridley Scott directing, and I did appreciate that they treated the original film with respect and reverence. Maybe that should go without saying, but it's kind of a lost art these days, so I think it ought to be pointed out when it happens. The thing is, though, the filmmakers might have been a bit too reverential, because it doesn't seem like they had many new ideas here, and the ones they did come up with weren't very good. Hell, the entire film is basically just a beat-for-beat rehash of the original. Some Roman dude goes to war, his wife is killed, he gets taken prisoner, becomes a gladiator, inspires the people as he rises up to challenge the power-mad emperor and tries to free Rome from this tyrant. It's the same movie all over again. And yeah, they do try some new things along the way, but I don't think any of them were to the movie's benefit. When they're just following the same basic narrative or trying to build connective tissue with the first film, it's fine. It's not as good as the original, but it's fine. But when they try to differentiate Gladiator 2 from Gladiator 1, more often than not, it drags the movie down or gets just plain silly. For instance, they try to level up the battle scenes in this one by adding animals. So the gladiators aren't just fighting other gladiators, sometimes they're fighting animals too. Giant rhinos, crazed baboons, stuff like that. And this was a little goofy and the CG was pretty obvious, but I didn't mind it so much. But when it really got too fucking silly for its own good was when they filled the Colosseum with water, threw some man-eating sharks in there, and had the gladiators do this maritime battle on boats. So you've got boats crashing into each other, people falling into the water, getting mauled by sharks, and I'm like, can we go back to the part where the Colosseum is watertight? Because I'm having some trouble with this. I'm admittedly no history buff, but the ancient Romans having the technology and the resources to convert the Colosseum into a giant aquarium to the point where they fill it with thousands of gallons of seawater and then capture and transport several 20-foot sharks into it for one event only to change it right back to normal for the next one? Seems downright bonkers to me. I could not take this sequence seriously, and it's one of the biggest in the movie, so that didn't help. A bigger problem is they tried to make the political subplot more complex, but all they really did was make it less interesting. In the original, they kept it nice and simple. Commodus is jealous of Maximus, so he murders the emperor and seizes power for himself. Easy peasy, that was all they really needed. In this one, there are twin emperors who rule Rome together, and they're both evil, but one is very clearly the Alpha. He's the more sane, handsome, rational one, whereas Emperor Beta is just a crazy cartoon character that Alpha has to kind of babysit. And there's this whole plot about Denzel Washington's character ingratiating himself to them and sowing the seeds of dissent so he can gain power, and it all just felt so unnecessary. It's an entire movie of political machinations just for kind of a lame, underwhelming payoff at the end that could have easily been done without any of that stuff. It felt like the whole plot was concocted just to give Denzel more screen time, and that in itself is not a bad thing. He's certainly the best actor in the movie, but I feel like if they'd cut maybe 10 minutes out of this plot and combined the twin emperors into one character, you could have gotten to the same place not only quicker, but without a lot of the silly stuff too. I will say that Joseph Quinn is quite good as the Alpha Emperor, even though the part is pretty underwritten. The film doesn't give him much to work with, but he does a lot with what he gets to make himself stand out. The Beta Emperor, though, I don't know where their heads were at with that guy. They do some stuff with him, especially in the third act, where it's as if they thought they were making a comedy all of a sudden. They should have just cut this character altogether or given his screen time to Joseph Quinn, because this really didn't work. Both of them are a far cry from Commodus, by the way. And there's other stuff like that too, specifically on the political side of things. Generally, the film suffers from having too many subplots and too many characters, with few that make enough of an impression to mean something, and some that are just transparently filling the same role as people from the original film, so nobody has much to do or say that's really new that wasn't already done a lot better in the first Gladiator movie. Speaking of which, the main character, Lucius. I can see why they cast Paul Mescal. He's a rugged dude, he's built like a gladiator, he does well with the action, he even kinda looks like Russell Crowe, but Maximus, he ain't. I mean, the writing he gets is not nearly as good, but he just doesn't have the same gravitas. Maybe he needed better direction or something, because a lot of his acting choices really took me out of the movie. There were a bunch of scenes where I wanted to yell at him, "Dude, you just watched your wife get killed right in front of you. Why the hell are you smiling?" His whole performance is weirdly off-kilter. He seems too casual a lot of the time. He doesn't get angry or fired up when he needs to. Frankly, he just seems out of place in this thing. And what's more, his motivation is all over the damn place. He starts out hating Rome, and then that animosity focuses on a specific person, which then changes to him hating like 3 or 4 different people, and then it all comes back around to him wanting to save Rome, and I'm not really sure how that happened. His entire arc felt confused, and like the political stuff, just needlessly complicated. I'm not saying you shouldn't try new things, but I mean, Maximus just had a simple revenge story against one guy who betrayed him, and it's no contest as to which narrative was more compelling, and the same applies to the climax, unfortunately. It all comes down to a 1v1 fight, but this time the bad guy is the underdog, and is also the bad guy that Lucius was given the least reason to hate, so there's no tension there. It feels inevitable that Lucius will win, and it's not even a satisfying win either, because the villain is leaps and bounds more charismatic than Lucius, and it's so one-sided he didn't even make Lucius work for it. Not really. It's all just a big anticlimax. One thing I did like was they made an effort to tie this story back to the original Gladiator. Those events are referenced a lot, Maximus comes up quite a bit, and the filmmakers tried to connect a bunch of the emotional threads in the film to him. I appreciated that. But even then, if this works for you, if it tugs on your heartstrings, it's because the original film was good, not because of anything this one did. And as I was watching this, I kept thinking, you know, this would hit a lot harder if, 1, Lucius acted like he gave more of a shit about it, and 2, if it hadn't been 24 years since I last thought about Maximus. But he doesn't, and it had been, so it just doesn't have much of an impact. Gladiator 2 isn't a disaster of a film. I like the action, the visuals. Some of the cast are very good and rise above some of the subpar material they're given. Denzel Washington, Joseph Quinn, Connie Nielsen. It makes an honest effort to follow up the first film in a respectful way, but the movie is too long, overly complicated, and most of the attempts it makes to try something new or level up from the original make it seem like the filmmakers just didn't have their heads screwed on straight, resulting in a movie that, when it's not in blatant rehash mode, doesn't have a whole lot to offer that would make a sequel to Gladiator even worth doing in the first place. You've absolutely seen much worse movies this year, but Gladiator 2 just felt unnecessary. It's not a bad film, but it's not a great film either. Frankly, your time would be better spent just watching the original again. It never needed a sequel in the first place. Not every movie does, Hollywood. Audiences are getting wise to that Maybe it's time you did too. Thanks so much for watching. While you're here, ding that bell icon and follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. The links are down there. And don't forget to do all the other YouTube things by smashing that like button, leaving a comment, sharing the video, subscribing if you haven't already, and making sure you're still subscribed, because what really deserves to be taken prisoner by a tyrannical empire and forced into a coliseum to do battle against CG rhinos and man-eating sharks is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now. I'll be back with more soon. Take care, stay tuned. I'll see you next time.